Okay, we are recording on my channel.
Erev Tov. Okay, so last time we started talking, we mentioned the concept of Shloshim Yom Lefnei Achag. Shalim v'dorshim b'chot Achag. We're now less than 30 days before Pesach, and so the halachot, aside from the obligation to study the halachot, but certain halachot of Chag Pesach kick in, so to speak, within 30 days before. So I mentioned how this has practical ramifications for bdikat chametz, checking chametz, and this is a very common question which many people ask. This year it's all the more common for a number of people. So the case is when somebody leaves their home and somebody's not going to be at home before Pesach, or maybe, depending how we read the Gemara, if you go away and you come back just before Pesach, when is one required to do bdikat chametz? So the Gemara tells us, Gemara Pesachim, Daf Vav, it says, Amar Yehuda Malav, Amfalesh v'yotzei b'shayala. The case there in the Gemara is somebody was going out to sea or joining a shayala, a caravan. Right? Kodem shloshim yom en zakuk leva'el. If it's more than 30 days before Pesach, one is not required to go through, check the chametz, get rid of the chametz. It's too long in advance. You don't have to think about it. Toch shloshim yom zakuk leva'el. If it is within 30 days, however, then from now, before one leaves, one should think about what they have at home and get rid of them. So then the Gemara qualifies. Says, Amar Abaye. Abaye says as follows. He says, that which we said, within 30 days, one is required to check and to get rid of the chametz. Again, the language of the Gemara is not livdok, but it's leva'er, it's to get rid of it. He says, Lo amran ela sheda'ato lachzor. It's only in the case where he intends to come back. Gemara doesn't say here when he intends to come back. And there's really a machloket rishonim. According to Rashi, it means he intends to come back on Pesach itself. You come back during Chol HaMoed. According to the Rambam, no, it means you'll come back before Pesach. But again, you never know. Your flights will get delayed. You don't know exactly when you'll arrive. You may not have time. But in any case, says Abaye, only if you are planning to come back, you need to check. You're not going to come back until after Pesach. So, even within 30 days, you don't have to check, you don't have to do the bdika. So says Abaye. Says Rava v'ida tolachzor, afilu men Rosh Hashanah nami. Rava says, I don't understand. If you're planning on coming back on Pesach, or just before Pesach, according to the Rambam, so you're going to come back, you're going to come to your house, you're going to have a house full of chametz, you're going to have problems. So I don't care. You leave even from Rosh Hashanah, you leave half a year in advance. You have to do b'dikat chametz before you go out. It's only about, so says Rava. Rather, el amar Rava, alamat kol shoshim yom en zakuk leva'el, lo amran ela she'en dato lachzor. But dato lachzor, if right, that's if you're planning on coming back, you have to check even from before 30 days. What comes out of it is that even though you're not going to be at home, you're not planning on coming back. Nonetheless, you left within 30 days. You have to do the bdika. You have to check for your chametz before you go. And this is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says this in Siman Taf Lamed Vav. Says Amfalesh mei bashal yam yaseh b'shala eno maniach bebeito mi sheyivdo. So he adds in it that this is all talking about if you don't have anybody that's left behind, anybody in your home. You have a family member, or you can appoint a shaliach, somebody else who's going to be there on Erev Pesach. They can check. That's fine. But if there's no one there. So again, toch shloshim yom zakuk livdok. You can hear the language now is livdok. And the Gemara had said in the Ba'er to get rid of, but it's all relates to the same point. He says Shulchan Aruch, within 30 days, you need to check your chametz before you go. V'lo yavarech al biur chametz. Says the Ramah, there is no bracha for this bdika. The bracha that we make when we do bdikat chametz, that's only when you are checking the night before Pesach. If it's before 30 days, however, you don't need to check. So as I had mentioned, many people travel for Pesach, go away to a hotel, go to an Airbnb, go overseas, whatever it may be. People get very, very stressed by this question. I'm leaving my house. Do I really have to do bdikat chametz the night before I go? Do I have to clean the kitchen? Do I have to do the whole thing? Do I have to spend hours and hours? So many people prefer, rather than having to do this bdikat chametz, they will just sell the whole house before, sell all the chametz inside. That's a separate issue, and that's a separate question to talk about. Mechirat chametz, Rowan spoke about last year, the Yom Iyun. But Mechirat Chametz, as it's throughout the generations, has had its detractors. One of the issues that's raised is, in order for it to be effective, it has to be a serious sale. It has to be a serious transaction. We're not just doing it for the sake of, taking, essentially we are, but it's only you, the guy who you sell your chametz to, really owns the chametz, and how we do that. If you're saying, we're not just selling the chametz, I'm going to sell my whole house, okay, there's something that seems a little bit not so serious about that. But nonetheless, is it necessary? Is it necessary to go that far? What do we mean when we say that somebody leaves the house, is not going to be in the house for Pesach? They have to do b'dikat chametz the night before. What exactly is required? I think in order to understand exactly what is required, and will help us maybe make our b'dikat chametz for the house we are going to be easier, because people added a lot of unnecessary work for themselves before Pesach. But let's understand what is really behind the b'dikat chametz. What are we trying to achieve? And then we'll see how it fits into the specific shayla. So right at the beginning of Masechet Pesachim, first Mishnah speaks about b'dikat chametz. Rashi over there tells us, why do we check for chametz? In order that we should not transgress bal yareh or bal yametzeh. Chametz on Pesach, as we know, we can't just eat it. We can't derive benefit from it. We cannot own it. So it's two separate isurim of owning chametz, bal yareh or bal yametzeh. And Tosfot, the first Tosfot in Masechet Pesachim, famous because the first one, right? Tosfot says, questions in Rashi. He says, hang on a minute. We know the Gemara tells us in a few places, it says, bitul ba'al masagi. Minat Torah midoraita, it's enough just to do bitul. I don't need to get, in order that I should not transgress the prohibition of owning chametz, all I have to do is say a declaration, say whatever chametz is in my possession is not mine, it's like dust of the earth, doesn't belong to me, it's nothing. And that's it. If I've done that, and I've done it belev shalem, right? I have to actually mean it. I can't just say, now it's not, all the bottles of whiskey that I have now, they're nothing. The day after Pesach, I'm going to go and drink them again. Obviously, that doesn't work because you're not really saying that they're nothing. If you sell them, it's something else. But on a Torah level, it would have been enough just to do that. You don't have to go through the house. You don't have to check anything. So why do we require to do both b'dika and bitul? So the Ran talks about, so I'll read you from the Mishnah Berurah. He explains as follows. The Shulchan Aruch, where he tells us that we have to check for chametz, and then Mishnah Berurah says, Gam tzarech levatel azet chametz. So we do both b'dika and bitul. We do both. From the Torah, just one of them would have been enough. Either you could do b'dika or you could do bitul. So why do we do both? It's not yours, you haven't transgressed. All the more so, let's say you didn't do bitul, you just searched your house, you searched properly, you got rid of all the chametz. Okay, what's the problem? Chazal said that's not enough. You can't just do one, you need to do both. Because Chazal were worried. They understood how human beings work, and they were worried for the following reasons. When we say bitul, what is bitul? It's just a declaration. Like I say, it's in your heart. You're saying, this no longer belongs to me. It's no longer significant. It's the chametz is like dust of the earth. So that depends on a person's intent. It depends on a person's sincerity. Okay, maybe a person thinks I have, thousands of shekels worth of chametz in my house. Okay, I'll sue the bitul because that's what you have to do. But I'm not really so happy about losing all this money. So you say it with your mouth that it's nullified, and it's like dust of the earth, very, very expensive dust of the earth. You don't really mean it. Your bitul will not be sincere, and then you've transgressed midoraita of owning chametz. So Chazal were worried about that. Because you didn't get rid of it. Not only that, there's another concern. What chametz is unlike other forbidden foods, and that generally speaking, a forbidden food is forbidden whenever. But chametz, most of the year, is permitted. You can eat it. So since you're used to eating it all the time, if you have chametz in your home, and let's say your bitul was sincere, you really, really meant it, but nonetheless, you've got the whiskeys there, the breads there, whatever it is, you might forget, You haven't transgressed the mitzvah of Bal Yira'eh, but you've done something worse because you forgot about it and you wake up in the middle of the night or whatever in the morning, you have your breakfast, and you think, oops, today was Pesach, right? Therefore, לכן תקנו חז"ל שאף על פי שבטל לו סגי, אלא צריך לבדוק לבערו מן העולם. And therefore, Chazal said it's not enough just to do bittul, but you have to do the bdika as well. Okay, he goes on then and he explains the other side of it. If that's the case, why shouldn't just bdika be enough? Why do we have to do bittul as well? That is for another reason. But what we see from this explanation, the two reasons why Chazal said you have to do bdika and not just bittul. Reason number one is that we're concerned your bittul didn't work and therefore you transgressed the prohibition of owning chametz. Reason number two is that we are concerned that even if you don't own the chametz, you might forget and you might come to eat the chametz. Right? So essentially, maybe, depending on how you read it, maybe a machloket between Rashi and Tosfot, exactly what is the reason behind bdikat chametz. But those are the two prohibitions. And therefore, we always have to ask ourselves, when we come to perform the bdikat chametz, we're trying to ensure that A, we don't transgress owning chametz, and B, we don't transgress eating chametz. Now, the parameters of those two mitzvot are going to be very, very different. When it comes to owning chametz, it's only if it's, we're generally talking about that which is edible, we're talking about that which is from a kazait and upwards. Crumbs of chametz, the Chazon Ish had a different shita, but based on the simple understanding of the Gemara, and most of the Rishonim and Achronim say that crumbs of chametz, there's no prohibition of owning crumbs. Crumbs are not significant. There's no particular, right? You have particularly if they're in an area where you can't get to, they're stuck behind some heavy object on some corner where you can't get to them. You don't transgress anything by owning them. They aren't significant. You don't have in mind. That's why when it comes to selling chametz, are you selling the crumbs, or are you selling the crumbs that are stuck to the pot, and all sorts of questions like that. But when it comes to eating chametz, so anything, even the smallest crumb, is chametz. And if you've eaten it, you've eaten chametz. And the Gemara says that when it comes to generally the laws of bittul, we talk about the laws of bittul of basar v'chalav or any other forbidden foods. So 1 in 60, or sometimes 1 in 100 or 200. But if it's a very, very small amount, it's considered insignificant, and then it's permitted. When it comes to chametz, if on Pesach, before Pesach is a bit different as well, but on Pesach you have the smallest gram of chametz that goes into your food, it's not nullified. You've eaten chametz, and therefore, when you're checking for chametz and getting rid of chametz in the home, so areas which are not going to come into contact with food at all, if there's crumbs somewhere, I don't have to go crazy. The crumbs are there on the floor, that's fine. But if it's an area, if it's in the kitchen, that's going to come into contact with my food, and I have crumbs of chametz in my kitchen, that's going to be a problem. So how this translates, practically speaking, into bdikat chametz, I think is very significant. But for our question, we'll say the following: when we're dealing with the fact that you might come to eat, so if you're not going to be in your home the entire Pesach, then clearly you're not going to eat anything that's there. But if there is significant amounts of chametz that's there, that's what we're concerned about. That's the only thing we're checking for. So at the end of the day, somebody is not going to be in their home on Pesach. You have to do the bdika the night before. So the bdika means essentially you're going into your kitchen, you're opening up the fridge, you're opening up the cupboards, you're looking at the places where it's likely and possible that chametz could be. And if there's chametz there, then you get rid of it. Do you have to go into all the corners and all the nooks and crannies and scrubbing and cleaning and kashering? And certainly not. That's not required at all. And therefore, that's the distinction in terms of that's the bdika that's required. Particularly if one's not going to be home, it's only things of a kazayit and more, and areas where it's likely and feasible where chametz could have been in the first place. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash אומר לקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל לפיכך בעל הנתון מצוות שנאמר עליך בית זמן צדקו יגדיר תורה ויעקב.